Let's talk about money. It's this thing we all deal with every single day, and we think we get it, right? But what if I told you that being good with money has almost nothing to do with how smart you are and everything to do with how you behave?
Yeah, we're all taught to think about money like it's a science. It's all spreadsheets and calculators and finding the perfect formula. We act like it's just a math problem that if we're smart enough, we can solve. But the real story, well, it's not in the numbers at all.
And this quote just nails it. The biggest choices we make about our money, they don't happen in a neat little spreadsheet. They happen around the dinner table. They're tangled up with our ego, our pride, our deep-seated fears, and our own unique personal history. It's this constant tug-of-war between what the math says and what our very human hearts feel.
Okay, so that leads us perfectly into our first big idea, what we could call your financial DNA. This is all about why people do things with money that look, from the outside, totally irrational. But from their point of view, it actually makes perfect sense.
Just think about this for a second. Your personal experience with money is just a teeny tiny slice of financial history. But to you, it feels like the whole truth. So if you were born in 1950, you grew up watching the stock market basically go nowhere for years. Why on earth would you trust it? But if you were born in 1970, you saw the S&P 500 shoot up 10 times over while you were in your teens and 20s. Of course, you'd be a stock market bull. Our entire idea of how money works is shaped by the little economic window we happen to be born into.
And that's really the bottom line of this section. We all make financial decisions based on our own mental model of the world, a model built from our own unique experiences. So your choices make total sense to you. My choices make sense to me. And yeah, we might look at each other and think that's crazy, but the truth is, nobody is actually crazy.
All right, let's shift gears and talk about what is maybe the most powerful and honestly the most misunderstood force in all of finance, compounding. And to explain it, there's no better example than the master himself, Warren Buffett. The name says it all, right? He's the icon of investing success. And this number, his net worth when this book was being researched, it's just staggering. Now, we all assume it's because he's just a flat-out genius investor, and he is, but that's only half the story.
But get this is the part that just blows my mind. The vast majority of his wealth, we're talking over 96% of it, came after he was already old enough to collect Social Security. His skill is absolutely investing, no doubt. But his secret is that he started when he was a kid and he just never stopped. His real secret weapon is time.
So to really drive this home, let's do a little thought experiment. The real Warren Buffett started investing when he was just 10 years old. But what if he'd been a little more like the rest of us? What if he'd spent his early money, bought a car, traveled a bit, and only started investing seriously at age 30 with a pretty respectable $25,000?
Well, if that had happened, if he had started at 30 and retired at 60 like a normal person, his net worth would have been 99.9% less. It's almost unbelievable. Instead of over $84 billion, he'd have had about $12 million. That is the insane, jaw-dropping power of compounding. It's not really about getting the absolute highest returns. It's about getting pretty good returns that you can sustain for the longest possible period of time. So, we've got our personal experiences, we've got the power of time. But what about all the stuff we can't control? The hidden forces we can't always see? Well, let's talk about luck, its identical twin, risk, and those rare events that come out of nowhere and change everything. We all know the story of Bill Gates, right? He was a genius, he worked incredibly hard, and he was. But he also had this unbelievable, almost impossible stroke of luck. In 1968, he happened to go to Lakeside, which was the only high school on the entire planet that had a computer. The odds of that, literally 1 in a million.
But here's the part of the story that most people never hear. Gates had a friend, Kent Evans, who was by all accounts just as smart, just as visionary. He could have easily been a co-founder of Microsoft. But Kent experienced the flip side of a 1 in a million event, a tragic, random risk. He died in a mountaineering accident before he even graduated high school.
And what this incredible story really shows us is that luck and risk are just two sides of the same coin. They're both a powerful reminder that every outcome in life is guided by forces that are way beyond our individual effort. We can't control them, but we have to respect them.
This all brings us to a really cool concept called tail events. The basic idea is that in a lot of areas in life, a very small number of events, these huge outliers, the extreme events way out on the tail of the probability curve, are responsible for the vast majority of the results.
And once you get this concept, you start seeing it absolutely everywhere. Think about it. An art collector can be wrong 99% of the time, but if that 1% they get right is a Picasso, none of the other bets even matter. Amazon's incredible success is really driven by a few massive winners like Prime and AWS, which more than pay for all the failed experiments like the Fire Phone. And when you watch a comedian's Netflix special, you're seeing the 1% of jokes that absolutely killed, not the thousands that bombed in tiny clubs along the way. In so many fields, the tails drive everything.
Okay, so what do we do with all this? How do we take these big, kind of abstract ideas about psychology and time and luck and turn them into a mindset that actually helps us with our own finances? That's what we're going to cover right now.
First things first, we have to get our heads around the huge difference between being rich and being wealthy. Being rich is visible. It's a high income. It's the fancy car, the big house. It's all about spending. But wealth is what you don't see. It's the money that hasn't been spent. It's the assets in the bank, the investments that are quietly working for you. Wealth is what gives you freedom and options.
And that right there, that's the whole point. The greatest, most valuable thing that money can buy isn't more stuff, it's control. It's the ability to wake up in the morning and say, I can do whatever I want today. The ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want. That is the highest form of wealth, period.
So how do we build that kind of wealth? Well, we have to understand the real price of admission to the market. See, the cost of getting those long-term returns isn't something you see on a price tag. It's paid with your emotions. It's paid with fear, with doubt, with uncertainty, and with all the gut-wrenching volatility. Now, if you think of that volatility as a fine, you'll do anything to avoid it. But if you can reframe it and see it as the fee, like the ticket you buy to get into the amusement park, then you can learn to stick around long enough to enjoy the ride. And all this leads us to the final and maybe the most important question you can ever ask yourself about money. The real danger is the moving goalpost, that social treadmill where the answer is always just a little bit more. The real key to using money to build a happy life is figuring out your own definition of enough. Because if you can't answer that question, the chase will just never, ever end. Definitely something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.